Welcome back, listener. If the rain or fire sound is playing and the screen is dark, you're in the right place. Let your thoughts quiet down. This story will keep watch while you rest. Tell me in the comments, what time is it for you right now? And are you listening with the lights on or off? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Story 1. The night the highway swallowed my friend. I need to confess something. I was the last person to see Dev alive, and the thing that took him wasn't human. It all started on a stupid, simple road trip. My best friend Dev and I were driving from Chicago to Denver, a journey wed done a dozen times before. We were cutting through the long, flat stretches of Nebraska on I-80, the kind of road that lulls you into a trance. Sun had set hours ago, and the world outside was a void of black, broken only by the feeble reach of our headlights and the occasional distant red pinprick of a taillight vanishing over the horizon. Dev was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other gesturing as he explained some complex coding problem from work. The radio had given up to static an hour back, and the only sounds were the hum of the engine, the hiss of tires on asphalt, and our own voices. Everything was normal. Almost. I remember 3 things that felt off, even then. First, the smell. Not the usual car smell of old fast food and air freshener, but a faint, coppery scent, like wet pennies, that seemed to come from the vents. Second, the GPS on my phone had glitched, showing us driving through a field miles off the actual highway, its cheerful blue line cutting through nothingness. And third, the roadkill. There was so much of it, not just the usual possum or raccoon, but large, unidentifiable dark shapes, torn and glistening under our high beams every few miles. I mentioned it to Dev. He just shrugged, his face lit by the dashboard's green glow. It's the prairie, man. Things get hit out here. Don't be so jumpy. So I settled back, trying to shake the unease. That's when we saw the hitchhiker. A lone figure, standing perfectly still under a broken highway lamp about 100 yards ahead. No backpack, no car in sight. Just a tall, slender person in a dark, long coat. One arm held out with a thumb extended. As we got closer, the details refused to resolve. The face was a smudge of shadow under a hood or hat. The coat seemed to ripple like it was made of liquid tar, and the extended hand was pale, too pale, almost glowing. "We're not stopping," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Dev, ever the good soul, frowned. "Dude, it's the middle of nowhere. It's freezing. What if they're in trouble?" "Dev, no, look at them. It's not right." He slowed the car anyway, the engine dropping to a purr as we rolled past the figure. I forced myself not to look, staring straight ahead at the empty road. But in my peripheral vision, I saw it. The hitchhiker's head turned, smoothly, mechanically, to track our car. And it wasn't standing by the road anymore. It was now standing on the white line of the shoulder, a full step closer to the asphalt. I didn't see it move. "Just drive, Dev. Please, just drive. He sighed, annoyed, but pressed the accelerator. I watched the side mirror, my heart hammering against my ribs. The figure under the lamp was gone. The post stood empty, casting its sickly yellow circle on bare gravel. We drove in tense silence for another 20 minutes. The weird smell was gone. The GPS had righted itself. I started to feel foolish. See, I told myself, you spooked over a weirdo hitchhiker and some dead animals. Out here in the silence, your brain fills in the blanks with monsters. Dev had put on some music, a low synthwave playlist, and the mood was almost returning to normal. I was about to apologize for being paranoid when the headlights caught something in the middle of our lane, far ahead. Another dark shape. More roadkill, Dev muttered, but he didn't slow down. As we got closer, the shape didn't look right. It was too angular, too vertical. It was a suitcase. A hardshell navy blue suitcase, standing upright on its wheels, right on the center line as if waiting for a bus. What the hell? Dev swerved gently into the empty left lane to avoid it. As we passed, my window was level with the case. It was pristine, not a scratch on it. And it was facing us, not lying on its side, but standing, facing the road, like a person. I craned my neck to watch it recede in the taillights. It didn't move. It just stood there in the vast, dark emptiness, a perfect, absurd monument. Okay, let me ask you guys something, because I think about this a lot now. What's your rule for weird stuff on the road? Do you stop? Do you call someone? Or do you just lock the doors and pray you get past it? Because in that moment, I learned my rule the hard way. The false safety shattered about 10 miles later. A thunderous bang rocked the car, followed by the violent, flopping shudder of a blown tire. Dev cursed, fighting the steering wheel as we lurched onto the rough gravel of the shoulder. The car slid to a stop, tilted at a sickening angle. The silence that followed was absolute and crushing. No cars, no wind, just the faint tink-tink-tink of the engine cooling. Great, just perfect, Dev groaned, slapping the wheel. He popped the trunk and got out. I followed, the cold night air biting through my jacket. The rear passenger side tire was shredded. We had a spare, but changing it on the sloped, dark shoulder felt like a monumental task. The circle of light from our phones and the car's dome light was pitiful against the overwhelming dark. We worked quickly, the metallic clanks of the jack and lug nuts absurdly loud. That's when I heard it. A sound like dry reeds rustling, or maybe stiff cloth dragging over gravel. It came from the ditch beyond the shoulder, a deep gully lost in shadow. You hear that? I whispered. Dev paused, lug wrench in hand. Probably a coyote or the wind. But there was no wind. The air was dead still. The rustling came again, closer now. Then a soft, wet click, like a tongue detaching from a roof of a mouth. We worked faster, our breaths puffing white in the frantic light. The spare was on. The lug nuts were being tightened. The sounds from the ditch had stopped. See. Nothing, Dev said, standing up and wiping his hands. He tried to sound brave, but his eyes kept darting toward the blackness. He threw the flat tire into the trunk and got back in the car, locking the doors with simultaneous relieved thunks. Dev turned the key. The engine cranked once, twice, and died. No, 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 he tried again. The dashboard lights flickered, and the engine gave a weak, gasping whir. Dead, completely dead. The battery, the alternator, it didn't matter. We were stranded. In the silence, a new sound emerged. A faint, melodic hum. It was tuneless, yet rhythmic, coming from outside the driver's side window. Dev froze, his hand still on the key. Slowly, very slowly, we both turned to look. There, standing about 6 feet from the car, was the hitchhiker. It was closer now, close enough to see details that made my mind recoil. The long coat wasset cloth, it seemed to be made of layered shadows, absorbing the light from our car. The pale hand was still extended, but the fingers were too long, the joints too many. Its face, it had no face. Where features should be was a smooth, concave dish of darkness, like the inside of a satellite receiver. And from that dish, the soft, humming vibration emanated. It wasn't coming toward us. It was just standing there, humming, hand out. Don't look at it, I breathed. Dev, don't make eye contact. It doesn't have eyes, he whispered back, horrified. We sat, paralyzed, for what felt like an hour. The thing didn't move. It just hummed its empty tune. Finally, Dev's survival instinct kicked in. We can't stay here. We run. That next exit can't be more than 5 miles. We run together. It was a terrible plan, but sitting in a metal coffin felt worse. On the count of 3, we flung our doors open and sprinted. The cold air burned my lungs. The gravel skittered under our shoes. We didn't look back. We just ran, 2 tiny, frantic points of life in an ocean of night. I heard the rustling, dragging sound again, keeping pace with us in the ditch to our right. It was faster now. Don't stop, Dev yelled. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The road behind us was empty. The thing was gone, but the rustling was right beside me, just beyond the lip of the ditch. I pumped my arms harder, my heart a frantic drum. Then Dev screamed, not a yell of fear, but a short, sharp cry of surprise, cut off. I stumbled to a halt, wheeling around. Dev wasn't behind me. He was just gone. The stretch of highway shoulder where he'd been running was empty. DEV, I screamed. My voice vanished into the nothingness. I ran back, my phone flashlight beam jumping wildly. His glasses were lying on the gravel, one lens cracked. A few feet away, near the edge of the ditch, was one of his shoes. There were no drag marks, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the ground had simply opened up and swallowed him whole. The rustling in the ditch had stopped. The humming was back, but now it was everywhere, vibrating up from the asphalt, down from the stars. It was coming from the ditch, from the fields, from inside my own head. I stood there, utterly alone, the beam of my phone shaking violently in my hand. I couldn't run. I couldn't stay. I was prey, and the hunter was the landscape itself. Slowly, I pointed the light into the ditch. The beam cut through the tall, dead grass. And there, at the very bottom, I saw it. Not Dev, but the hitchhiker. It was crouched, its form folded in on itself in an impossible way. Its featureless face dish pointed directly at me. Wasn't humming anymore. It was perfectly silent, and in that silence I understood. It wasn't offering a ride. It was waiting for an offering. Dev had been the offering. The roadkill, the suitcase, the blown tire, they were all part of the lure, the trap set by this stretch of hungry highway. The thing unfolded, rising to its full, impossible height. It didn't advance. It just raised that pale, multi-jointed hand again, not in a hitchhiker's gesture, but in a slow, deliberate wave goodbye. Or maybe hello. I ran. I ran until my lungs were fire and my legs were jelly. I don't know how I made it to the gas station at the next exit. I babbled to the clerk, to the sheriff's deputies who came. They searched for days. They found Dev's car, still dead on the shoulder. They found his glasses and shoe. They found nothing else. No body, no signs of an animal, no evidence of another person. The official report says disappeared under mysterious circumstances. I know the truth. I still drive sometimes, but only during the day. And whenever I pass a long, empty stretch of night highway, I roll up the windows, lock the doors, and I never, ever look at the shoulder, because sometimes the road is hungry, and sometimes it learns your name. I think it learned mine that night. The humming hasn't really stopped. I just hear it now from inside my own walls, a soft, persistent vibration in the foundation, waiting for me to come back outside. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of primal dread, you know how these things linger. If you want to hear more tales from the edge of the unknown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next journey into the dark. And down in the comments, let me know what's the strangest, most unexplained thing you've ever seen on a lonely road. Stay safe out there. Story 2. The night the highway swallowed my friend. I should have listened to my gut when it told me that highway was a living thing. My name is Lee, and this is the story of how I learned that some roads don't just lead to places, they lead to things. And my best friend Dev was the toll it demanded. It started as the most mundane of modern rituals, a road trip to a remote airbend, the kind you book for the aesthetic, not the location. Dev had found Ida converted fire lookout tower deep in the Pine Barrens, promising total isolation and epic stargazing. Digital detox, Lee, he said, flashing that infuriatingly charming grin. No service, no emails, just us, some terrible campfire food, and the universe. I agreed, eager to escape the gray grind of the city. The drive out was when the first wrong notes sounded in the symphony of normalcy. The GPS, a few hours in, began to glitch. The cheerful blue line would vanish, then reappear, rerouting us down increasingly narrow roads. We laughed it off, blaming the dense canopy of pines blocking the signal. But then the road signs started, or rather, stopped. The familiar green markers with town names and distances just ended. We were on County Route 9, a 2-lane blacktop that felt older than the trees crowding it. The second detail was the silence. No other headlights. For 3 hours, we saw not a single other car. The world outside the windows was a wall of black, our headlights carving out a lonely tunnel of asphalt and yellow lines. The third thing was the smell. Rolling down the window for some air, I caught a thick, coppery scent, like wet pennies and old soil, that came in a sudden, overwhelming wave before vanishing as quickly as it came. Dev said he didn't smell a thing. So, what's the longest you've ever driven without seeing another car or person? That feeling of being the last people on earth it's freeing, until it very, very suddenly isn't. We finally found the turnoff, a gravel track so overgrown it was barely a suggestion. The tower, when it loomed into view, was a stark silhouette against a star-flecked sky. It was beautiful in a skeletal way. The first night was fine, peaceful even. We lit a fire in the pit below, told stupid jokes, and the vast silence felt expansive, not oppressive. The next day, we decided to explore. That's when Dev found the path. It wasn't on any map of the property. It began behind the tower, a thin, unnaturally straight line cut through the undergrowth, heading deeper into the woods. He was fascinated. A secret road. Maybe it leads to an old ranger station or something. I felt a cold prickle on my neck. The path was too perfect, too deliberate. The dirt was dark, almost black, and nothing grew on it, not a blade of grass, not a weed. It looked less like a path and more like a scar. That evening, the sounds started. Not animal sounds. This was a low, rhythmic thumping, like a giant, slow heartbeat coming up through the floorboards of the tower. Then whispers. Not voices you could understand, but the texture of whispers, the sibilant rush of many somethings just at the edge of hearing. We blamed the wind in the pines, but there was no wind. The air was perfectly, deathly still. Dev, ever the skeptic, went outside with a flashlight. I watched from the window as his beam swept the tree line. He stood there for a long time, completely still. When he came back in, his face was pale. Thought I saw something, he muttered. Just a trick of the light. But he didn't elaborate, and he didn't joke for the rest of the night. The following morning, Dev was gone. Not his stuff, just him. A note was scrawled on the back of a receipt on the table. Lee followed the path. Found something incredible. Back soon. Deep panic, cold and sharp, stabbed through me. I called his name until I was hoarse, ran down the tower stairs, and stood at the mouth of that black dirt path. It seemed to pulse in the morning gloom, inviting and threatening in equal measure. I had no choice. I followed. The path went on for what felt like miles, the woods growing denser, darker, the sunlight fading to a murky green filter. The coppery smell was back, stronger now, mixed with something sweetly rotten. Then the trees opened up. I wasn't in the woods anymore. I was standing on the shoulder of a road. But not just any road. It was County Route 9. The same cracked asphalt, the same faded yellow line. But it was impossibly, terribly wrong. It was a closed loop, a perfect circle of highway carved into the middle of the wilderness, with no entrance or exit. In the center of the circle was a tangled mound of stuff. Rusted car parts, broken signs, shattered glass, and clothes, all woven together with thick, thorny brambles. And standing in the middle of the road, his back to me, was Dev. Dev, I screamed. He didn't turn. I ran onto the asphalt. The surface wasn't hard. It gave slightly under my boots like flesh. I reached him, grabbed his shoulder. He turned. His eyes were wide, blank, reflecting the overcast sky like pools of oil. "Listen," he whispered, a faint smile on his lips. "It's singing." That's when I heard it. Not a heartbeat or a whisper, but a low, resonant hum that vibrated in my teeth and bones. It came from the road itself. The asphalt around his feet began to soften, to become viscous. It crept up his ankles like black tar. He didn't struggle. He looked peaceful. "It's okay, Lee," he said, his voice distant. "It just wants to show you where the road goes. It's beautiful." I screamed, pulling at his arm, but he was rooted. The tar-like substance was at his knees, pulling him down. He was sinking into the highway. His blank eyes finally met mine, and a flicker of my friend returned, pure terror breaking through the trance. "Run, Lee. Don't follow the path. Don't let it show you that." His words were cut off as the substance surged up to his chest. With a final, sickening slurp, Dev was pulled under the surface of the road. The asphalt smoothed over, pristine and unbroken, as if he had never been there at all. The humming stopped. The woods were silent. I ran. I don't know how I found my way back to the tower, blind with tears and terror, every shadow a reaching tendril of asphalt. I threw everything into the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I peeled out, gravel spraying, and didn't stop until I hit a real town, with real lights and real people. I told them everything. The police, of course, found nothing. No path, no circular highway, no Dev. They called it a tragic case of a hiker getting lost, suggested maybe he'd fallen into a bog. They were kind, pitying. They didn't believe a word I said. I wish that was the end. I wish I could believe he's just lost. But last night, I was driving home from work on the interstate. The rain was sheeting down, my wipers struggling. And for a second, in the glare of my own headlights on the wet pavement, I saw a face just under the surface of the asphalt. It was Dev's face, pale and stretched, mouth open in a silent scream. It was there for a heartbeat, then gone, washed away by the rain. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from an unknown number. Just a single, familiar image, a screenshot of a map showing a long, lonely stretch of County Route 9. And a pin dropped right in the middle of it, blinking slowly. A pin with my name on it. The highway isn't done with me yet. Thank you for listening to my story. that chill down your spine, you know that some horrors stay with you long after the story is over. If you want to help me keep sharing these warnings from the edge, please hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that there are more stories like this that need to be told. And in the comments below, I have to ask, have you ever been on a road that just felt wrong? A stretch of highway that made your skin crawl for no reason you could explain. Share your experiences. Sometimes, the only way to not feel alone in the dark is to hear someone else whispering back. Stay safe out there, and remember sometimes, the road chooses the driver. Story 3. The night I learned about highway ghosts. I still don't know if the thing on Highway 17 was ever really trying to catch me, or if it just wanted me to understand I could never leave. My name is Tyler, and until last month, I was the kind of guy who laughed at roadside ghost stories. You know, the once phantom hitchhiker, the lady in white, the headlights that follow you into oblivion. I'd heard them all on late-night drives with my buddies, fueled by cheap gas station coffee and a reckless sense of immortality. That arrogance evaporated somewhere between mile marker 73 and a reality I can no longer explain. It started as a simple, if tedious, drive. My grandmother had passed, and the task of clearing out her remote cabin in the thick pine forests upstate fell to me. The cabin itself was a time capsule of dusty Afghans and the faint, sweet smell of pipe tobacco, a scent that clung to the logs like a memory. I'd spent 2 days boxing up photo albums and old china, the silence of the woods feeling peaceful, not ominous. By the time I locked the door, loaded my car, and pointed the nose of my sedan south toward home, it was already past 10 p.m. Highway 17 is a notorious stretch of 2-lane ribbon of asphalt that cuts through miles of uninhabited state forest, known for sharp curves, sudden fog banks, and a complete lack of cell service. I'd driven it a dozen times before. This time, I was alone. The first hour was uneventful. My headlights carved a tunnel through the pressing darkness, the only sound the hum of my tires and the low murmur of a static-laced radio station. The pine trees stood like silent sentinels, crowding the road's edge. Then I noticed the first detail, subtle enough to dismiss. The reflective paint on the dash center line seemed dull, not worn, but almost absorbed by the asphalt, as if the road itself was drinking the light. I shrugged it off as tired eyes. The second detail was the smell. Rolling down my window for a blast of cold air, I was hit not with the crisp scent of pine, but with a coppery, damp odor, like wet soil and old pennies. It was gone as soon as I rolled the window up, leaving a metallic tang at the back of my throat. The third was the silence. The static on the radio didn't just fade, it died into a perfect, vacuum-sealed quiet. No engine hum, no tire noise, just the frantic thump of my own heart in my ears. I tapped the dashboard. Great, I muttered to the empty car. Perfect time to lose the alternator. that's when the headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Distant, but unwavering. A sense of relief, thin and immediate, washed over me. Another car. I wasn't alone out here. I slowed a little, expecting them to eventually roar past me. They didn't. They matched my speed precisely, hanging back about 100 yards. I sped up. The headlights sped up. I slowed to a crawl. They slowed. A prickle of unease traced my spine. It's just someone being cautious, I told myself. Or a cop running my plates. But there were no flashing lights, and the vehicular was road with its high beams on. 2 blinding orbs that washed out my mirrors and cast long, leaping shadows of my own car ahead of me. Okay, viewers, I have to ask because I think about it all the time now. What's your personal rule for driving at night? Is it never picking up hitchhikers? Never stopping for a car that looks broken down? For me, it was always keep your gas tank above half. I never considered the rule should be never acknowledge the car that shouldn't be there. I decided to test it. I pulled over onto the narrow gravel shoulder, my tires crunching loudly in the profound silence. My plan was to let them pass, then continue on my way at a distance. The headlights slowed. They didn't pass. They stopped directly behind me, flooding my entire interior with a harsh, white light. I could see nothing of the vehicle itself, just that blinding glare. My breath fogged the windshield. Minutes ticked by. Nothing moved. The urge to get out and confront them warred with a deeper, primal instinct to flee. I chose flee. I slammed the car into drive and pulled back onto the road, accelerating hard. The headlights were instantly on me again, glued to my bumper. Fear, real and cold, was now a knot in my stomach. The road began to feel unfamiliar. The curves were sharper, the trees denser. I passed a mile marker that read 73. I was sure it passed mile marker 74 20 minutes ago. A sign for a town I knew was another 30 miles south appeared, then flickered in my headlights like a bad film projection, before solidifying into a sign for a different, unknown town. The geography was warping. I was trapped on a loop of asphalt, with that thing as my tether. Then, a break. Up ahead, a dim, yellow glow pierced the Teresa roadside diner. Silvertop Diner, according to a flickering neon sign. It was a relic, the kind of place that looked permanently closed, but light spilled from its windows. It was salvation. I signaled, a ridiculous formality under the circumstances, and swerved into the empty gravel lot. The headlights didn't follow. They continued down the highway, disappearing around the next bend. I sat there, hands shaking on the wheel, and watched the taillights vanish. The false safety was so potent it felt like a drug. It was over. It was just some jerk, and they were gone. I let out a shuddering laugh, the sound alien in the quiet. I needed to use a phone, call a tow truck, anything. I stepped out of the car. The diner was empty, not a late-night empty, but a decayed empty. Dust coated the countertops. The stools were upturned on the formica tables. The light came from a single, buzzing, fluorescent tube hanging by wires. coffee pot was dry and cracked. A calendar on the wall was frozen on October 1987. My heart sank. It was a facade, a stage set. I turned to leave, and through the grimy window I saw my car. And behind it, parked silently, was the other vehicle. It wasn't a car. It was a silhouette, a black shape that absorbed the moonlight, featureless except for those two blinding headlights, now extinguished. It had never left. It had been waiting. I stumbled back, knocking over a stool. The sound echoed through the dead diner. Outside, the driver's side door of the black shape opened. Nothing emerged. It was just a rectangle of deeper black. A voice, if you could call it that, slithered into my mind. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling of words, cold and oily, forming directly behind my eyes. Tired, Tyler. The road is long. You can stop running. You've always been here. I understood then. This wasn't a haunting. It was an absorption. Highway 17 was a digestive tract, and this thing was its keeper, feeding on the lost, folding them into its endless length. The ghost stories were the echoes of people who'd partially escaped, leaking memories of their capture into our world. My grandmother's cabin wasn't just a family holding. It was a landmark on the edge of its territory. And I had driven right in. The climax was not a chase. It was an unveiling. The diner's walls dissolved into the forest. Not the real forest, but a twisted copy of it. Every tree a frozen figure in mid-scream. Their bark the texture of petrified flesh. The asphalt of the highway bled up like a tide, consuming the gravel, the diner foundation, my shoes. The thing from the car was everywhere and nowhere. A consciousness woven into the road, the trees, the air. It showed me. It showed me the countless others woven into the pavement, their faces pressing up against the tar like drowning men under ice, their despair a constant, silent fuel. It offered me a choice: join the chorus of the road or run, and feed it the sweet energy of my terror forever. I ran. I don't know how. I tore through the screaming trees, the copper smell thick in my lungs, the sound of my own panic a beacon for it. I found my car, not where I left it, but on a different curve, the engine dead. I prayed, I cursed it, I turned the key. It sputtered to life. I didn't look back. I drove like a man possessed, and this time the mile markers began to change, counting down. 50, 40, 30, I saw the first glow of real town lights in the distance. Dawn was a gray smear on the horizon. I sobbed with relief. I emerged onto the interstate as the sun rose. I drove straight to the busiest, brightest truck stop I could find, surrounded by the roar of diesel engines and human voices. I sat in my car and cried. I told the police a sanitized version of reckless driver, a breakdown, getting lost. They nodded, bored. I got my car checked. The mechanic found nothing wrong. I wish that was the end. But the ending is the worst part. I am home now. I sleep with all the lights on. I can't look at a road at night. And 3 days ago, A new highway construction project started on the edge of my suburban town. They were repaving the main arterial. Last night, I walked my dog past the fresh, black, steaming asphalt. And there, pressed just beneath the smooth, pristine surface, was a perfect, familiar handprint. And beside it, slowly forming as I watched, another one, smaller, reaching out. The road is growing, and it remembers who fed it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of dread, then you understand why I had to share this. Please, if you enjoyed this tale, give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next journey into the unknown. And most importantly, tell me in the comments, have you ever driven on a road that felt wrong? What's your strangest roadside experience? I read every single one. Stay safe out there, and remember, not all paths are meant to be taken. Story 4. The guest room my family never used. I never should have opened the door to the guest room. You know, the one every family seems to have a room like it. The one with the slightly different, colder air. The one where the door always seems to latch a little too firmly. The one that just feels set apart. In our old family cabin, it was the bedroom at the end of the upstairs hall. The one my grandmother, with a strange, tight smile, always called the visitor's room. Not the guest room, the visitor's room. A small semantic difference that, as a kid, I never questioned. But as an adult, inheriting the crumbling, pine-scented relic after her passing, I learned the terrifying weight of that word. My name is Rachel. I am a graphic designer, and after the soul-crushing year, it had a messy breakup, a layoff, the general urban exhaustion idea of spending a month at the remote family cabin to sort through grandma's things and maybe find some creative inspiration seemed like a godsend. The place was a 3-hour drive from the nearest town, nestled in a dense thicket of Washington state pines, so deep the sunlight arrived in hesitant, green-tinted shafts. It was the definition of quiet. At first, it was the good kind. The crackle of the fireplace, the whisper of wind in the towering firs, the absolute, profound silence at 2 a.m. I set up my laptop on the rustic kitchen table, made tea, and tried to embrace the solitude. But the cabin had its own rhythms, its own personality. The floorboards in the hall creaked in a specific sequence every night around midnight. A slow, deliberate creak, pause, creak, creak, as if someone were pacing. I wrote it off as the house settling in the cool night air. The smell of my grandmother's rosewater perfume would sometimes waft through the downstairs, faint and sweet, even though Id packed all her toiletries away in a sealed box. A bittersweet reminder, I thought. And then there was the visitor's room. Its door was heavier than the others, made of dark, unpainted oak with a tarnished brass knob that was always cold to the touch. It was the only room with a lock on the outside. A small iron slide bolt positioned high enough that a child couldn't reach it. I found the key to that lock on my grandmother's key ring, labeled with a faded piece of tape that simply read VR id tried the door once, out of curiosity, on my second day. The knob turned, but the door wouldn't budge. It wasn't just locked, it felt held, like something was pressed against the other side. I told myself it was just swollen wood from decades of mountain humidity. The strange events escalated slowly, a dripping tap of unease. I'd find faint, muddy footprints on the porch in the morning, though it hadn't rained. They were small, like a child's, but oddly splayed. One night, I was jerked awake by the sound of scratching. Not the frantic scrabbling of an animal in the walls. This was slow, deliberate, like someone dragging a fingernail down the length of the interior log wall of my bedroom. It started at the ceiling and ended at the floorboard. Then silence. My blood turned to ice. I lay there, paralyzed, until dawn bleached the darkness from the room. What about you guys? Have you ever been in a place, maybe a relative's house or an old hotel, where one room just gave you the absolute creeps for no reason you could explain? Let me know in the comments. That feeling, that primal aversion, is what I should have listened to. After the scratching night, I decided to be proactive. I was a modern woman, not some fainting heroine in a Gothic novel. I bought motion sensor lights for the porch and a Wi-Fi camera for the main living area, though the internet signal out here was a joke. I told myself it was wildlife. A curious bear, a determined raccoon. The camera captured nothing but me, looking increasingly tired, moving through the rooms. But the sounds continued. Whispers, just below the threshold of comprehension, seemed to seep from the heating vent in my room. They weren't in English. They were guttural, rhythmic, like a distorted chant. I started sleeping with noise-canceling headphones, the weight of the silent, listening house pressing down on me. Then came the night of the storm. A proper Pacific Northwest tempest that howled through the pines and made the cabin groan like a living thing. The power died with a pop, plunging me into a blackness so complete I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I fumbled for my flashlight. Its beam was a frail, jittering thing, carving shaky tunnels through the dark. And that's when I heard the new sound. A thud, then another, coming from upstairs. A heavy, soft impact, like a sack of wet grain being dropped. Then the slow, dragging sound of something being pulled across the floor of the visitor's room. Terror pinned me to the couch, but a colder, more rational fear followed. What if a branch had broken through the roof? What if there was water damage happening right now, ruining whatever was in that room? The thought of explaining to my family that I'd let the historic cabin be damaged because I was scared of a noise finally got me moving. Heart hammering against my ribs, I took the flashlight and the fireplace poker and ascended the stairs. The hallway was an abyss. My light beam danced over the closed doors. The dragging sound had stopped. The only noise was the fury of the storm outside and the deafening drum of my own pulse. I stood before the visitor's room door, The iron slide bolt was still fastened, but the key was in my pocket. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was the definition of a bad idea. The responsible air part argued back. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a gritty, metallic shriek that seemed to echo forever. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. Not just unoccupied empty. No furniture. No rug. No curtains on the single, square window that was now a black mirror reflecting my terrified face and flashlight beam. The floor was bare, wide plank pine, scrubbed clean. The walls were bare logs. It smelled of dust, pine sap, and underneath it all, a faint, coppery tang like old pennies. The storm's violence was muffled in here, the room strangely soundproofed. I let out a shuddering breath I didn't know I'd been holding. See, nothing, just an empty room. A family quirk. Scratching, the dragging it must have been the storm, the trees against the roof. I felt a wave of foolish relief. I was about to back out, to lock the door, and never think of it again, when my flashlight beam caught something on the far wall. Not on the wall. In it, carved into the dark wood of one log at about waist height, was a series of marks. I stepped closer, the floorboard squealing under my foot. They weren't random scratches. They were tallies. 4 vertical lines, then a diagonal slash through them. A count. And there were dozens of these grouped marks, covering a section of the wall, methodical and neat. My grandmother's hand. But why? As I leaned in, the beam of my light trembled over the last set of tallies. The wood there was lighter, newer. The carvings were recent, and they weren't finished. The final set had only 3 vertical lines. The 4th was incomplete, a short, jagged gouge, as if the carver had been interrupted. A cold draft, sourceless in the sealed room, coiled around my ankles. That's when I heard the soft click behind me. I whirled around. The heavy oak door was slowly swinging shut, not from the draft. It moved with a deliberate, smooth motion. I lunged for it, a cry strangling in my throat. My fingers brushed the cold brass knob just as the door met the frame with a soft, final thud. The sound of the iron bolt sliding home on the outside was the loudest thing I have ever heard. A dry, metallic snick that sealed me in. Panic, pure and electric, exploded in my chest. I threw myself against the door, pounding on the solid oak, screaming until my voice was raw. No one answered. There was no one to answer. The storm raged silently beyond the soundproofed room. I was alone. No, I was in here with whatever counted on that wall. Exhausted, I slid down the door, my flashlight clattering to the floor, its beam pointing at the opposite wall. That's when I saw it. The wall with the tallies. As my light played over it, the shadows between the carved lines seemed to shift, to deepen. And from that darkness, a new mark began to form. Not carved, burned. The wood darkened, blistered, and smoked as a 4th vertical line slowly etched itself next to the 3 incomplete ones. It was being drawn by an invisible, scorching finger. The copperandozone smell of burning wood filled my nostrils. The final, diagonal slash began to sear its way across the 4 lines, completing the tally. A whisper filled the room, not from the vent this time, but from everywhere and nowhere. It was a child's voice, but ancient and dry as dust. One more, it sighed, a sound of profound satisfaction. A visitor for the visitor's room. The beam of my flashlight died, plunging me into absolute, hungry darkness. I could feel it then, the presence that had been waiting, patient, behind the tallies. It wasn't in the room with me. The room was it. The walls seemed to breathe in to tighten. The air grew thick and cold, pressing down on me with a physical weight. In the suffocating black, I felt a small, cold hand slip into mine. Its fingers were too long, its skin like parchment. It gave a gentle, possessive tug. I have stopped screaming. I have stopped pounding. The door won't open, not for me. Sometimes, from the outside, I hear the floorboards creak. Creak, pause, creak, creak. A slow, deliberate pacing past my door. And sometimes, very faintly, I catch the scent of rosewater perfume. My grandmother's scent. A warning, not a memory. A plea to keep the door locked, to never complete the count. I understand now. The visitor's room doesn't host guests. It collects them. And I am the final tally on the wall. I sit here in the dark, waiting. The lock is on the outside. And sooner or later, someone always comes to open the door. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you know the kind of fear that sticks with you. If you want to hear more tales of lingering horrors and things that wait in quiet places, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And let me know in the comments what would you have done when you found that key. Thank you for listening and staying until the end. If you enjoyed this narration, please leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel for more stories in the dark. Sharing it with your friends helps keep these nights alive. Sleep well. The rain will continue.